Okay, so here we go again with another one. All right, so in the Gen 2 prototype, one of the maps, there was the ruins of Alph, and it kind of had a completely different history. It might actually be even different than it was now in the final version. There's been speculation that the original ruins of Alph was supposed to be like a memorial for a city. Like now, some people say it was for Hiroshima, where they dropped the nuclear bomb and all that, but I don't. I've heard some people speculate it was another city, and there's more reason to believe that. So it's either Hiroshima or the other one, not the where they dropped the other atomic bomb, but it's another city in Japan that it's basically dedicated to remembering a lot of people that lost their lives. Basically, I'll have to look into it, but basically, so yeah, basically the way the story would have went was it's centered around that had this ruins in the center. Now, what's really interesting is if you actually play Pokemon Reforge, it's a hack that somebody made using all the prototype data, and that's actually where you catch Suicune. Actually, if I don't know how much, but the thing is though, I don't really know 100% if that's what they originally would have done with the ruins of Elf. I mean, it's very possible that they just maybe they added some stuff to it, or maybe that's just where they put the legendaries. But at the same time, though, it's it is interesting to think that as far as Pokemon games go, who really knows what Game Freak really scrapped from there? I mean, you could catch Mew, you could catch Mewtwo, and these were all maps that they used in the game. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if maybe at some point, maybe that's what Pokemon Gen 2 was supposed to be. But then again, maybe it was just a hack using prototype data to, so you could catch all 251 of them that they had at that time. But, maybe they wanted you to still trade with the other games, rightfully so. So I can understand that. But basically, though, talking about the city, though, basically what it really kind of boils down to is, you learn about the Unknowns history, and the Unknowns were basically like lost souls, and Ho-Oh revived them. Ho-Oh revived them. And but we already knew that Ho-Oh actually had mystical powers, that it could bring the dead back to life, and it could even bring the Pokemon. It turned even the three legendaries into the three legendary dogs back to life, and hence that's where they basically came from. So a bunch of legendary Pokemon that were revived through the dead flames of ashes. And it really makes you wonder, Ho-Oh's got psychic powers, even though it's not really, I think it's a flying and a fire type. Yeah, it's not a psychic type. But it does remind me, though, the whole the idea that, what is Lugia's purpose, other than just calming seas and maybe giving someone like Rayquaza and Kuroge a run for their money with what their powers are. Like airlock ability and drizzle, Lugia says it's the guardian of Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres, but if you think about it, I mean, if Gen 1 and Gen 2 were supposed to be completely different, but their counterparts, the ideas that they did use, still made it to the final game, how much different would Lugia's story would have been? Because here's where it gets really strange, when you really think about this with the prototype of Gen 2. Even though Lugia was nowhere to be found in that game, but they ended up adding Lugia there at some point. But the idea of Lugia did exist, though, because it was supposed to, its name was actually written down, but they just wanted to use it for something else. They wanted to reveal it at some point. So if Gen 2 was supposed to be something else, I guarantee you they probably would have used Lugia in Generation 2 at another point in time. Maybe just not as early on as the Space World demos predicted, but eventually Lugia would have still been an idea that they would have introduced in the games later on. Maybe not right away, but, either Gen 2 or Gen 3, but I think Gen 2 because, again, it kind of made sense because Lugia's main purpose was it was supposed to be it was actually a tower legendary, as opposed to Ho-Oh. But here's what we know about Ho-Oh, though. Ho-Oh obviously saved a bunch of people's lives, and we knew it had that kind of power. But it's Lugia is a Pokemon that, its tower burned down, if you remember where the Tin Tower was. There was also known as the Brass Tower. Now, the way it works is the tower got struck by a lightning bolt, and it just you know, it burned the tower down. It didn't hit Lugia, thankfully, but Lugia's tower burned down, therefore it flew away. It's even possible that maybe Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno kind of went there every now and again, too, to check up on. Because, you know, like, if you remember playing Generation 2, like, you know, you remember when you go to the Tin Tower, you actually find the legendary dogs sleeping in the Brass Tower remains in the basement. And then later on, you know, you'd find Raikou, Entei, and Suicune just hanging out there. But Suicune stays behind and decides to fight you, but all the other ones run away and they start roaming around the Johto region. Not in the Kanto part, but the Johto region. And so it really does make you wonder, you know, how much different would the stories would have been if they would have kept all the prototype data? Would the Roman legendaries had been roaming legendaries? Would they just go, would you go catch them in a cave and they'd still be a pain in the ass to catch, but, you know, needless to say, they'd still be legendary Pokemon. I know they looked a lot different, though. I still think Raikou's design was actually, they took what was known as Raitora 2's evolution, which was Gorotora, basically what we know it as right now. I believe that's where they got the idea from, and then the other two Pokemon, they scrapped them because they decided, you know, maybe legendary Pokemon weren't supposed to have babies right away. But we know that Gen 4 had Fanny, and then it could, you could bring it back as Fanny and Manaphy. Manaphy could lay eggs and have another Pokemon called, and its stats are basically the same, if I remember correctly. So I thought that was pretty cool, though. So, anyways, basically, this is what I'm looking at so far with the way the prototype data is. The maps were a little bit different, and it was all supposed to be one map due to, you know, they had cartridge limitations again. But as time went on, eventually, what happened was, you know, once Satoru Iwata came around and wrote that compression algorithm for the game, I know they did it. They mentioned it in Sun and Moon, and they even mentioned it in you know, interviews. They stated that, you know, they basically redid Pokemon Gen 2 because they basically had a lot more cartridge space to work with, so they basically included the Kanto region. It's really interesting how they did this, because when the Kanto region was being done at the time, it was just all squeezed into one area, and it looked a little bit smaller than it did now, but Red was supposed to be like the 8th gym leader, and it's just crazy, man. Like, they changed so much stuff over the time, and then Red ended up obviously being the last, you know, Pokemon gym leader you fight, or last trainer you would fight in the game, and, you know, Mount Silver, you know, high level 80s and all that. In the remakes, in the original, it was just high level 70s, and it's pretty cool, actually, how they came up with that. Not only that, but let's see here, like in Generation, was it Generation 2, was it? You know, you had a bunch of ideas at that time that got scrapped, but over time, you know, it makes me wonder, you know, would the Ruins of Alph still had the same story, though? Because it's like one of the story, you know, from what we understand it as, you know, Arcturus uses the unknowns to create stuff, but at the same time, the unknowns, you know, they're still raveled in mystery what exactly they are. You know, I mean, on one hand, the unknowns, like, it's like the Dexter entry state. You know, when you see just one of them, nothing happens, but when a whole bunch of them swarm together, a whole bunch of crazy things happen. You know, mystical powers that are like from the supernatural side, you know, like there's another universe or another parallel, you know, like what does it all mean? You know, like it kind of captures that same magic of what makes Pokemon. Like, you know, the whole thing is an adventure. You don't know where it's going to lead you. You're trying to figure out like life's pasts and beyond, you know, in the future. And you're trying to like ask yourself what it's all for, you know, kind of like, it kind of reminds me of like the ending to Cowboy Bebop, you know, like, you know, some of the lyrics in the song where, you know, it's like never seen a blue sky, but you can feel it reaching out and getting closer. And then it's like something about blue, you know, basically it's talking about ascending into the afterlife. That's basically what it's about. And it's like, you basically, like, you know, the way it goes is like it's like character development. You know, you go from like questioning all this stuff in the mortal life, you die and ascend into the afterlife, and it's like, you know, you're starting to really like realize all the things that you were asking before, and now the answers are slowly coming to you. And that's kind of how I felt like Pokemon was as a metaphor. It's like because it reminds us of what life itself is, and it's like the Ruins of Alph, or the Ruins of Alpha kind of had its own depiction of that. You know, here it was proof that something was there many years ago,
but then it makes you wonder what those Pokemon were, what they were capable of doing, and who those people were. So basically, a bunch of your ancestors were a bunch of unknowns because they were the lost souls of said Pokemon, and thanks to Ho-Oh, it set them free from that little purgatory trap they were somehow condemned into. Not necessarily a hell for their sins, but it was just because that's how they just got reincarnated. What are these little symbol letters and all that? So Ho-Oh comes back and frees those people, creates a couple legendaries, and then returns back to its wherever it lies at. And it really makes me wonder what else they've done with the series, because if Pokemon like that actually, if that's like a chapter they left out, it really does make you wonder at the same time, is what about going back to, again, like Lugia, for example. The whole concept was it was supposed to be like, Lugia wasn't in the game at that point, but it does make me wonder, though, that if Lugia had been at that point, because it was an idea, really what could have been? I mean, if Lugia was in that game and it was kind of like what we were supposed to see it as, because like the map isn't really that much different when you think about it, but at the same time, there are parts that are completely different. I mean, I remember there was a dark gym that you could go to. I think it was the 7th gym you could go to. And then, or was it the 6th? 7th or 6th. But anyways, but what's really interesting, though, is, when you play that Pokemon game, and, I mean, yeah, they changed a lot of stuff. They moved a lot of stuff around, too. But it really did make you think, though, if some of those maps really were different, it makes you really wonder what changed and what didn't. Because, what else are we not comparing it to that should have been there to begin with? Pokemon's always been like that as a series. There's always tons of things that, we just find, we learn, and we still don't know. But, like, it over time, it does come clear to us, though, that you eventually start learning all these cool things. So, like, the ruins of Alph, actually, they were, like, dedicating their existence to, like, stating that there were, like, the whole, like, because if you remember in Pokemon Crystal, there were those puzzles you could solve for the prehistoric Pokemon, but at the same time, though, it was, like, stating that the legendary Pokemon were actually, saving them. So if you decrypt all the unknown translations, it basically told us that the unknowns were, in fact, trying to help the people out and all that. And I just think that's pretty cool that they were able to do that, because you really start to see what they, how they were able to interact with that. I think it's also pretty cool how they managed to do that, because you really start to see, like, the Pokemon for what they really were. And, some Pokemon, like, they have more mystery than they have us lead on to believe. Again, I think there's still more story to Ho-Oh and Lugia, especially Lugia, because, aside from it just being the sub-guardian of Zapdos, Moltres, Articuno, you really start seeing a lot more that could be there. Lugia doesn't really look like it's that intimidating, but it's like, it does work in the sense that, it really isn't easy to catch, and it is a legendary for a reason. But it does make you wonder, like, if somewhere in the prototype data that Lugia was supposed to have, I mean, even though, again, Lugia is not in the prototype, but let's say it was, though, it would make you wonder, though, that, would the stories between Ho-Oh and Lugia still been the same? Because it really does make you wonder how much different Ho-Oh's story would have been if, it wasn't there 100%. Again, Ho-Oh and Lugia are two different legendaries, but they share the same bond together. They were trying to protect the same people on one side of the town and on the other, but you could see the other tower into the distance, and before the other one burned down miraculously. And Ho-Oh felt like, well, it would return when a warm-hearted trainer decided to open its eyes to it. That's why it revealed itself to it. But at the same time, though, if you think about it, Lugia was a Pokemon that, it just kind of got off to a bad start, had some bad luck, and maybe it didn't really know what it wanted to do, and so it just ascended, like, to the southwest of Japan, of the Johto region, so it ended up in the Whirlpool Islands. I think it's the top right island is the correct answer to solving that puzzle. But anyways, so you basically would be surprised at, you know, like you can really see like a lot of things did change through development, but they finalized it in a way that they still wanted to keep it. You know, like Lugia was still, again, a water legendary, even though it was more of a psychic and a flying type, if I remember correctly. And then, you know, Ho-Oh was obviously a fire and a flying type, so it made sense. But at the same time, though, I feel like they wanted to balance out the difficulties because one legendary would be better than the other one in some ways, so that's why they don't. That's why Lugia doesn't have like the pure water type advantage, even though it learns a bunch of water type moves. So I think that was something on Game Freak's part that they did. I could be wrong though. But anyways, yeah. So yeah, there's again, prototype data, there's always tons of builds that we could talk about, tons of different Pokemon that were scrapped, that were moved to Gen 4. Tons of, I mean, they even found, like at one point in the Pokemon, they actually, like, if anybody remembers Yami Mega, or whatever the Pokemon is, the one that Yagma evolves into, the giant dragonfly from Gen 2, that Pokemon was actually supposed to be in Gen 2, when the prototypes, and Milo Mammoth, the one that Pillow Swine evolves into, I believe is how you say it, the one that Snub, you know, the little ice pig Pokemon that you can find in the ice cave before you get to Blackthorn City, I believe, the one where you fight Claire, in the final version of the game, the 8th gym leader, where the Dragon's Den is, the one where after you beat her, she basically says that, you know, she refuses to acknowledge that, you know, you actually defeated her. So she's like, oh, I want you to go to the Dragon's Den and take this test. And then she comes up to you and asks you, so how did it go? Did you fail? Then you find out you passed it, and she couldn't believe it. You know, just didn't want to admit that there were trainers out there that were better than she was, because she wanted to persevere somehow, but she didn't know how to do it. Right. So that's how Pokemon games usually go, right? Wanting to be the best, but at the same time trying to learn the world around you and what's it all for, you know? Especially all the artifacts from the past and all that, and it makes you wonder, like the ruins of Alph. Again, probably one of the older locations in the Pokemon trilogy, but it does really make you wonder, you know, how many things we really don't know about it that truly they ran their course, and at the same time, though, it really made you wonder what we don't see in it, if anything. Again, tons of Pokemon, tons of creations, tons of people, but so very little do we know about the series that, I mean, unless we have prototype maps to go off of, and even that's speculative, you know, we really don't know how much is really missing from the series, and unless we have it to compare to the final release, thankfully, you can really see, like, how much different the ideas would have really become. So, well, like, I'll end it like this. So, the ruins of Alph are we go from a location where Arcturus, the creator of the Pokemon, and whoever created Arcturus, its parents, because obviously it said it came from an egg from another dimension, uses the unknowns in all sorts of dimensions to create stuff and all that, but it's just one of its many ways, you know, just like we never see its 1,000 arms, you know, that it has. So anyways, you know, but then we have, like, the ruins of Alph. It stands in a really random location, but at the same time, though, there's definitely something there. Something built those ruins. And then at the same time, though, we also could believe it has mystical powers in a past. Maybe somewhere it leads somewhere else. And then you have tons of locations that are significantly better than it that, you know, we could only begin to understand what else is out there. And so, let's see here, what else? I wouldn't be surprised if, as far as the ruins of Alph go, that, you know, it really just expanded the story of Ho-Oh a little bit. But at the same time, though, we really do understand that that's why they threw all that extra information to be found in the ruins of Alph in the Pokemon Crystal version. Because
That way you really could see that Ho-Ho really did have a connection to it. And maybe Lugia too, if Lugia was actually supposed to be in the game at that point. So I think that it's safe to say that Lugia and Ho-Ho not only intertwined together, but it's possible that they very well could have been, you know, maybe Lugia could have saved those people too at one point. Again, like information we're not seeing, you know. It's, you know, because again, Ho-Oh does its own things and Lugia does its own things, but, you know, they basically try to fight to make the world a better place. And one way or another, you really got to wonder, you know, every time we see Ho-Oh, is it really the same Ho-Oh? Is it the same Lugia? I mean, or do they take the approach the anime does, where, like, you know, if anybody remembers that one episode where, you know, they were teaming up with Richie and his Pikachu to actually, you know, save those Lugias, the Lugia and the baby Lugia. You might remember how, like, you know, they got out of that cave and they found that Pikachu, and then Misty was like, she's like, I didn't know that Pikachus could be found here. And then they looked at the Pikachu again and they're like, well, wait a minute, we know who that Pikachu belongs to, and it was Richie's. If it was a Richie? Yeah, Richie. He just wasn't in view yet, but he was, like, coming back. Pikachu was just, like, kind of, like, running around gathering stuff. But it's like, I always remembered that episode. That was the episode before the Lugia episode. Yeah, and so basically, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest that the trilogy, they did that in the series, not just the anime, but even in the real games. Because here's something else to think about. If you remember the giant Dragonite episode, the lighthouse in Generation 1, there was also some people that are speculative that Lugia, the giant Dragonite, they say that they couldn't see the Pokemon, even though if you think about it, Pokemon could be seen. It was a giant Dragonite, but at the same time, it was a metaphor. There's been a lot of people that speculate that giant Dragonite kind of did the same cry as Lugia. So it's very possible that that's actually more proof that even the anime, before Lugia became what it was, actually, it ended right around the same time when the movie came out, almost. So, I mean, that episode did. So, if you think about it, the fact that, you know, even in the games, you know, Lugia was an idea even for Generation 1 at one point. I don't know. It's just crazy to think, like, you know, you look at the stuff nowadays and you're like, oh, well, that was just a giant Dragonite. That could have been something else. And then it's like, you know, years later, people start speculating some of this other stuff, and, you know, some of this prototype data comes up, and it just, you know, you really start thinking, okay, you know, how much different was the trilogy? Because some of this stuff really is too heavy to ignore. I think it's really interesting to think that. That's like the same thing with, like, the ruins of Alph and the Pokemon in general. You know, you really start thinking, you know, maybe there was a lot more there than we're seeing. You know, Lugia was somehow tied to it. Maybe not. Maybe Lugia was just kind of its own legendary. But then again, you start thinking about Lugia's past and all that. What besides what we've seen, what else could Lugia do that, you know, it's just hanging out there, you know? Or I'll give you another example. You know, look at like a Pokemon like Celebi, for example. It's the guardian of the Ilax Forest, right next to Azalea Town and Goldenrod City. But it's like, you go there, and it doesn't look like anything happens there. But Celebi is there, though. Watching, waiting, time traveling. Makes you wonder what the legendaries do when nobody else is around. You know, it's basically the idea. So basically, the ruins of Alph really does make you wonder, what's going on there? So, yeah. You can definitely see where this is going. But anyways, so again, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. If you like these kind of videos, please watch them, because I'll keep making more of them.